Mom said she wanted to talk about flowers. "You've got the eye, honey," she told me on the phone. "Come by this Sunday. We'll have coffee, look at bouquets, and Natalie might join us too." I should have known right then. My mom, Susan, never says anything directly when it's important. And whenever she brings up Natalie casually like a bonus prize included in the invite, it usually means I'm walking into something loaded. So I drove back to the house I grew up in. White shutters wind Chime's porch swing that hasn't swung since Dad broke the chain 2 summers ago. He was out front when I pulled in trimming the hedges like he does every Sunday. That's Frank, my dad. Quiet, deliberate, never the first to speak, but always watching. "Hey, kid," he said with a half smile, then went back to clipping. Inside the kitchen smelled like lemon and coffee grounds. Mom hugged me at the door. "You look tired, Hannah. Are you eating enough?" "I'm fine, Mom." Then there she was, Natalie, my sister. 32, gorgeous, always a little undone on purpose. She was sitting at the kitchen table flipping through a magazine. Not mine, not a bridal catalog. Something arty European looking. She didn't say hi. We sat down for sandwiches. No mayo Mom remembers I hate mayo. Mark, my fiancé, jokes that I hate moist food, and he's not wrong. Susan made her usual small talk, asking about the caterer, the color scheme, whether we'd considered fairy lights for the barn beams. Then Natalie spoke. "I was thinking," she said, eyes on her magazine. "Maybe we could combine our events." I paused. "What events?" She looked up at me, that practiced wide-eyed face she's always used when she's about to ask for something big. "My launch," she said. "The collective, healing and art. We're renting a space soon, but the timing's tricky and people are hard to reach. But a wedding, it's perfect. A built-in audience." I looked at her, then at Mom, then at the napkin I was folding, then refolding. "It wouldn't take away from your day, sweetheart," Mom added quickly. "Just a short presentation. Natalie could hang a few pieces, maybe do a reading." Natalie smiled like she'd just suggested a toast, not a hijack. "Mark loves art," she said. "It could be beautiful, symbolic." I didn't say anything right away. My fingers found the edge of my coffee cup, still warm. I took a breath. "Natalie," I said. "This is my wedding." "I know," she said too fast. "That's why it matters. It would mean something, Hannah. After everything I need this." That was the part that stung. After everything. After Italy. After she dropped out of design school 2 years in, and Mom flew out to support her creativity. After the divorce, the debt, the years she stayed in our childhood bedroom while I was renting a basement room 2 towns over. And now she needed my wedding too. I stood up. "No," I said. Mom looked stunned. Dad stayed quiet. Natalie finally blinked. And me, I just picked up my purse and walked out the same door I came in. I didn't go home right away after leaving Mom's house. I drove around for an hour past the old middle school, the park where Natalie used to hold court like a little queen, and finally pulled into the grocery store parking lot. Just sat there, windows rolled down, hands clenched on the steering wheel. Funny thing is, I wasn't even angry. Not exactly. It was that old feeling again, tightness behind my ribs, like I was 12 years old watching everyone at the dinner table laugh at Natalie's story while I cleared the plates. That kind of ache doesn't burn. It just settles in and stays. Natalie was always the center of the room. When we were kids, Mom Susan used to say, "Your sister has a gift, Hannah. People notice her." And they did. And when she messed up, skipped class, snapped at teachers, forgot birthdays, well, people made room for that too. I was the quiet one, the good girl, the one who cleaned up after the show. I remember once I got a perfect score on a science project. Built the whole thing myself. Dad Frank helped me carry it to school. That night at dinner, I waited for Mom to say something, but she didn't, because Natalie had missed the bus, and apparently that was more interesting. That's the kind of stuff you don't bring up as an adult, because it sounds petty, but when it piles up year after year, it turns into something else, something heavy. And when I got my first full-time job, I started sending Mom and Dad money every month. They never asked. But I knew about the second mortgage, the one they took out to send Natalie to Florence for fashion school. I didn't want them to lose the house. It wasn't charity. It was duty. Family. At least that's what I told myself. That night, after circling the block a few more times, I went home and sat down with Mark. He was at the kitchen table sorting through RSVP cards, humming something off-key. He looked up when I dropped my purse and said, "Well, that was fast." I told him everything. When I got to the part about the Healing Collective, he raised both eyebrows. "You're kidding. I wish." Then I told him about how Mom backed it, about how Natalie made it sound like I owed her this stage. He didn't say anything right away. He just reached over, slid his hand into mine, and said, "So, what do we do?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm cutting off the payments." Mark blinked. "To your parents? They're still paying off a loan that wasn't for me," I said. "And they just asked me to surrender my wedding day for the person they took that loan out for. I think that's enough." He nodded slowly. "You sure they won't retaliate?" "They won't, because they know I'm right." I was surprised at how steady my voice sounded. I hadn't felt steady all day, but saying it out loud, drawing that line, it gave me back something I hadn't realized I'd lost. The next morning, I texted Mom. "Hey, Mom, just a heads up, I'll be pausing the monthly transfers starting next month. Mark and I are adjusting our budget before the wedding. Hope that makes sense." She didn't reply right away, but 3 hours later, I got a message from Natalie. All caps. "You're blackmailing them." I put my phone down. Didn't even answer. Some things don't need a reply. Natalie showed up at my apartment 2 days later. No warning. She rang the buzzer 3 times like it was a fire drill, then stood outside my door with her arms folded, sunglasses on, even though it was cloudy. That's Natalie, always ready for a photo that might happen. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "You're unbelievable," she said. "You think this makes you the bigger person? Punishing Mom and Dad for helping me." I didn't answer right away. Just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, matching her posture, but not her drama. "They didn't just help you, Natalie," I said. "They nearly lost the house. And you think your $500 a month is some kind of ransom. I think it was a choice," I said quieter. "One I made, and now I'm making a different one." She huffed, pushed her glasses up on her head. "You're selfish, Hannah." That almost made me laugh. Instead, I said, "Is Adrian still coming to the wedding?" She flinched just for a second. "Why?" "Because if you try to turn my wedding into some kind of stage for your next reinvention, he should probably know what he's walking into." Natalie didn't respond. She just stared at me for a beat, then turned and walked away. Her perfume lingered longer than she did. That night, I got a call from Dad. Frank doesn't call unless someone's dead or the dishwasher broke again, so I picked up right away. "Hey, sweetheart," he said. His voice was lower than usual, like he was still sitting in the garage with the door half open. "I heard you talked to your sister." I didn't say anything. "I also heard about the payments," he added. "Still nothing from me." Then, "You've done more than enough, Hannah. And I mean that. Your mother? She means well, but she gets tunnel vision when it comes to Natalie. Always has." I swallowed. "So what now?" There was a pause, tools clinking in the background. Then he said, "If you need security for the wedding, I'll cover it." That caught me off guard. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said, cutting me off gently. "Not because I'm picking sides, but because you deserve a day that's yours. No noise, no stunts." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I let it out. "Thanks, Dad." "Don't mention it." "Seriously." And Hannah, "Yeah, I'm proud of you." It was such a simple thing to say. And it came from a man who doesn't hand out praise like candy. I didn't cry until after I hung up. Adrian called me that Saturday afternoon. I almost didn't pick up. The number wasn't saved, and after the week I'd had, I was done answering unknowns. But something in me said this won you answer. He introduced himself quickly. "Adrian, Natalie's boyfriend." His voice sounded low and tired, like someone who hadn't had a full night's sleep in a while. He said he saw a post online. Natalie had written something about our wedding, something vague and poetic, but apparently she'd been telling people she was doing a surprise performance that day. A reading, maybe even a proposal. He asked me gently if I knew about it. I told him no. Absolutely not. There was a pause, and then he sighed. Said he'd figured as much. And then he told me the rest. That Natalie had been telling him and her friends that he was going to propose at my wedding. that it was all arranged, that our family was on board, that I was sharing my spotlight because I owed her a moment. Except he never said he'd propose. He never planned to. He wasn't even sure the relationship was working anymore, but every time he tried to talk to her, she shifted the conversation, made it about needing the wedding, needing the attention. And that was the word he kept repeating, needing. "She's not trying to hurt you," he said, "but she's drowning Hannah. She's using anything around her to stay above water. He told me he wouldn't be coming to the wedding, and that he was leaving her." I thanked him, hung up, sat on the couch and stared out the window for a long time. I didn't feel vindicated, just tired. And then, as if the universe had a sense of timing, the phone rang again. Grandma Eleanor. Her voice hadn't changed since I was a kid, tight-clipped, full of judgment, that always sounded like concern if you weren't paying attention. She didn't call to ask how I was. She called to scold, told me Natalie was heartbroken, that I had no compassion, that I was tearing the family apart for one fancy day. She said I was being unfair, cold, difficult, the same words I'd heard a dozen times over the years whenever I tried to speak up. Then she said something I'd heard so often it was like muscle memory. "I just don't understand why you're being like this." I remember pressing the phone tighter to my ear and thinking, yes, you do. You've always understood. You just never wanted to admit it. You understood when I got straight A's and you praised Natalie for trying. You understood when I was 12 and she broke my science trophy and you told me not to cry because she didn't mean it. You understood when you pulled me aside the day after her divorce and said, "Try not to make her feel worse by being too put together. She's known all along, so I said it." I told her, "You do understand. You just don't want to admit it, because if you did, you'd have to face what you've done." There was a pause. No gasp. No apology. Just the old wounded silence of someone who doesn't like being seen too clearly. I didn't wait for more. I ended the call, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel guilty, just free. I woke up at 5 on the morning of my wedding, not out of nerves, not excitement even, just a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Mark made coffee while I sat at the window watching the trees begin to glow in that early Vermont light. The whole world felt calm, as if it knew I needed a little peace before the day started moving. We'd chosen a small farmstead just outside Burlington. It had trees, a red barn, and a pond that filled up with frogs and lily pads in the summer. More than anything, it felt open, honest. By noon, everything was in place. White chairs lined the grass. Wildflowers marked the aisle. I could hear soft music playing, people arriving, small laughter rolling across the field. I peeked through the barn doors and saw familiar faces. My old roommate from college, my uncle from Maine. Dad standing quietly in the back, adjusting his tie for the third time. Then there was a knock at the bridal suite. One of the staff stepped in carefully. "She's here," she said, "with your grandmother." I nodded. I'd been expecting this. Natalie was waiting at the edge of the venue dressed in a long, off-white gown, not bridal exactly, but close enough to make a point. She wore a scarf like a sash and held something small in her hand, maybe a note, maybe her phone. Standing beside her was Grandma Eleanor, her expression hard, her posture sharp as ever. I walked toward them slowly, not angry, just clear. Natalie began talking as soon as I got close. Something about a reading, a message of healing, how it would tie into the spirit of the day. But I didn't hear all of it. I was focused on the way her voice tilted like she believed I'd fold the way I always had. I told her no. No performance, no reading, no moment. She blinked at me, thrown off, said she wasn't trying to ruin anything, that it would only take a few minutes. I didn't raise my voice. I just told her that I'd already given enough. This day, this one day, wasn't going to be shared. That's when Eleanor stepped in. She said Natalie had been through a lot, that I could show a little grace. She used the word cruel the way she always had when I didn't give in. I turned to her and said quietly that I wasn't being cruel. I was protecting something. Something I'd never protected before myself. Eleanor looked at me like I was speaking a language she didn't understand. Natalie didn't speak at all. Then I heard Mom's footsteps. Susan walked over slowly but deliberately and stood beside me. She didn't look at Eleanor or Natalie. She looked at me. Then she turned and said what I didn't expect her to say. "That's enough." She said it softly. No anger. Just finality. She told Natalie that this day wasn't hers to bend, that if she couldn't be here as a guest, she shouldn't be here at all. Natalie's face collapsed. Eleanor stepped back like someone had slapped her, and for once no one argued. The 2 security guards I'd hired approached calm and respectful. They didn't need to do anything. Natalie turned and walked away on her own. Eleanor followed, shaking her head. They left quietly, no shouting, no scene. And when they were gone, it felt like the air changed, like we could all finally breathe. Mark appeared beside me as if timed perfectly. He took my hand without saying a word. I looked around at the flowers, the trees, my mother still standing at my side. Dad watching from a distance, eyes full but proud. Mark smiled, ready. I nodded, not just for the ceremony, but for all the quiet that would come after. More than ever, I said, and we walked forward together finally without shadows. We spent the first night of our honeymoon on the coast in a small cottage with creaky floors and windows that let in the sea air. Mark fell asleep early, exhausted from a day of smiling dancing and steering us through something we both knew had been much bigger than just a wedding. I stayed up for a while, just sat on the porch and listened to the ocean. There were no calls, no texts, no drama waiting behind the next notification. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel braced for something. That silence, it was new, but it felt right. A few days later, back home, there was a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was from Natalie. Inside were 3 pages, half apology, half blame. She said she understood why I was hurt, but that I could have handled things differently. She said I had embarrassed her in front of our family, that I had made her feel small. She also said she needed time, that maybe one day we could talk. I didn't reply. I folded the letter once, placed it back in the envelope, and set it aside. A few days after that, Mom sent me an email. She said she had started therapy, that she and Dad were making changes, small ones but real. She told me that seeing me stand up for myself had shaken something loose in her, made her realize how much she'd missed over the years. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said she was sorry, and that she hoped we could stay in each other's lives in whatever way felt healthy. That one I did answer. Just a few lines. I told her I was open to trying, slowly. As for Eleanor, she didn't call, didn't write. I wasn't surprised. Some walls don't fall even when the house around them changes. And honestly, I didn't need her to. What I needed, what I'd always needed, was to feel like I could take up space without having to explain it. One night, a few weeks later, I pulled out our wedding album. Mark had gone to bed early again, and I couldn't sleep. I flipped through the pages slowly. The flowers, the smiles, the golden light caught in hair and lace. Everyone looked like themselves, only a little softer. Then I saw it. One photo. Just me. Standing under the arch mid-laugh. Sunlight catching my shoulder. No one beside me, no one behind me. I wasn't the supporting act. I wasn't waiting for permission. I was centered, and for once I didn't feel the need to shrink.